me? Why don't you mind your own business?
It was a bitterly cold January morning in 1952. Moe, Shemp, and Larry stood close together, not as performers, but as brothers saying goodbye. Around them were people who had truly known the man behind the laughter, the gentle, fragile soul beneath the wild curls. Then the mood shifted. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Someone had arrived who wasn't expected. Someone whose presence didn't bring comfort, but reopened old wounds. In that instant, Curly Howard's funeral stopped being just a farewell and became something far heavier. A confrontation with the most painful chapter of his life. A childhood built on near disaster. More than just the most recognizable of the Three Stooges, Curly Howard was also the most inventive. His wild improvisation, paired with unforgettable sounds like nyuk 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 and woo woo woo, turned him into something rare, a true American cult icon whose influence still echoes through comedy today. But long before the laughter and fame, Curly was simply Jerome Lester Horwitz. He was born on October 22, 1903, in Bath Beach, Brooklyn, which at the time was a lively summer resort area. Jerome was the fifth and youngest son of Jenny and Solomon Horwitz, arriving as a healthy 8.5-pound baby. In a strange twist of fate, he was delivered by Dr. Duffy, the brother of Moe Howard's sixth-grade teacher. Even his name came with layers. The world would know him as Curly, his family called him Jerome, and his brother Moe always referred to him affectionately as Babe. It's almost hard to believe how close the world came to never knowing Curly Howard at all. When Jerome was just 12 years old, a shocking accident nearly changed everything. One afternoon, while out hunting with a friend, he decided to clean Moe's .22 rifle. The gun suddenly went off. Before he could even understand what had happened, he saw blood pouring from his left leg. Panicked and in shock, he realized he'd been badly injured. The bullet missed anything life-threatening, but the damage was serious. It shattered bones in his foot and left lasting effects. Jerome was advised to have surgery, but he refused. That single decision followed him for the rest of his life. The injury left him with an unusual, awkward walk, a kind of bouncing strut that never fully went away. Years later, that same limp became a defining part of his screen persona. What began as a childhood accident ended up shaping one of the most famous physical styles in comedy history. As a child, Jerome was actually the quiet one in the Horwitz household. He didn't cause much trouble, especially compared to his older brothers. Moe and Shemp, on the other hand, were nonstop chaos. Moe later recalled a story that perfectly captured the madness of those early years. When Curly was still a baby, Moe and Shemp dismantled his brand-new carriage, ripped off the wheels, and turned it into a homemade soapbox racer. Then they placed the baby inside and dragged him all over town. Moe would later admit it was a miracle their little brother survived. And when their parents found out, the punishment was unforgettable. By the time Jerome was 4 years old, Moe and Shemp had already made up their minds. Their youngest brother was going to be a comedian. They cast him in tiny basement theater productions staged for friends and neighbors. Admission cost 2 cents. After splitting the earnings 3 ways, there wasn't much money left. But that wasn't the point. Those basement shows are widely believed to be Jerome's first real taste of performing, the spark that lit a lifelong passion. In school, Jerome was never a standout academically. Moe described him as a fair student at best, but outside the classroom, he thrived. A childhood friend, Lester Friedman, remembered him as a talented athlete who gained attention playing on his elementary school basketball team. Even though he never officially graduated, Jerome stayed busy. He worked odd jobs and closely followed Moe and Shemp, tagging along wherever their ambitions took them. As he entered his teenage years, another side of Curly began to shine. He fell in love with music and dance, especially ballroom dancing, and he was surprisingly good at it. He became a regular at Brooklyn's Triangle Ballroom, where he shared the floor with other serious dancers. Among them was a young George Raft, long before his rise to Hollywood fame. Few people today realize that Curly Howard once moved with grace and precision, not just slapstick chaos. Music followed him everywhere. He learned to play the ukulele and loved to sing while strumming along. Moe later summed it up simply: Jerome may not have been a strong student, but socially, he was always in demand, especially because of his beautiful singing voice. Moe continued to look after his kid brother, exposing him to vaudeville acts and melodramas in hopes of shaping his theatrical instincts. But Curly's heart was always drawn to comedy and musicals, where rhythm, timing, and laughter came together naturally. Then, while still in his late teens, Curly made a decision that surprised nearly everyone. He fell in love and got married. Even today, the identity of his young bride remains a mystery. What is known is that his mother, Jenny Horwitz, strongly disapproved. As the unquestioned authority in the family, she believed her youngest son was far too young to marry. Her opposition was swift and firm. Before the marriage even reached 6 months, she intervened, and the union was annulled. When the spotlight finally found Curly. By 1928, Curly had finally found his way onto a real stage. He landed a job as a comedy musical conductor for the Orville Knapp Band, and at the time, this was essentially his only professional performance experience. But if you ask Moe Howard, Curly didn't just do the job, he hijacked the spotlight. Curly was billed as a special guest conductor. He would walk on stage wearing a tuxedo that looked perfectly normal at first glance. Then the act would unravel, literally. As Curly wildly swung his baton, pieces of the suit began falling off, first a sleeve, then a pant leg, until the audience was laughing as hard at his appearance as they were at his frantic movements. Even in those early days, Curly had a natural instinct for physical comedy and timing that was impossible to ignore. While Curly was testing the waters, his interest in show business was growing fast. From the sidelines, he watched his older brothers, Moe and Shemp, building careers as on-stage troublemakers for vaudeville star Ted Healey. Their role was simple on paper: play the fools, take the hits, and make the star look good. But in reality, they were becoming the heart of the act. The name The Three Stooges came from Healey himself, a label he used to describe his clumsy, loud, and lovable sidekicks. Even today, historians still debate which brother officially joined first, Moe or Shemp. But the truth is, it didn't take long for one to pull the other in. Once that happened, the foundation of something special was already in place. One popular version of the story says it all began by accident. During a live show, Moe spotted Shemp sitting in the audience. The two started yelling jokes back and forth, turning the theater into a spontaneous comedy routine. The crowd loved it. Healey loved it even more. By the end of the night, Shemp was hired as a permanent part of the act. Then came the final and most unexpected piece of the puzzle: Larry Fine. At first glance, Larry seemed like the last person who belonged in a slapstick comedy trio. He was a trained violinist, a dancer, and a serious performer who had no interest in clowning around. Comedy wasn't even on his radar. But Moe and Shemp saw something in him that Larry didn't see in himself. After enough convincing, he agreed to join. And once he did, there was no turning back. One of the first things audiences noticed about Larry was his unforgettable hairstyle. Bald on top, with frizzy curls exploding from the sides. That look wasn't carefully planned or professionally styled. It happened by accident on the very first night the group met. As the story goes, Ted Healey went backstage to Larry's dressing room to persuade him to join the act. While they talked, Larry casually washed his hair. As it dried, the curls puffed out into that strange, uneven shape. Healey found it hilarious and immediately insisted Larry keep it that way for the stage. He was right. The look became iconic, and audiences couldn't get enough of it. For Larry, joining the Stooges wasn't just a career opportunity, it was an escape. Life as a traveling musician had been brutal. Performing in small towns often meant dealing with open anti-Semitism. Some nights were deeply humiliating. On one occasion, a hostile stage manager refused to let Larry use his own dressing room and forced him to get ready in a bathroom. Those experiences left lasting scars, but they also made his eventual success even sweeter. Despite how history remembers them, the Stooges were not originally meant to be a trio. At first, the group was supposed to be a foursome: Moe and Shemp Howard, Larry Fine, and Fred Sanborn. And even then, they weren't the stars. They were hired strictly as supporting players for Ted Healey's touring stage show. That setup didn't last long. The problem was simple. They were too good. Night after night, the Stooges began stealing laughs that were meant for Healey. Audiences came to see the chaos, the timing, and the chemistry of the sidekicks, not the man at the center. Eventually, Moe, Shemp, and Larry had enough. They broke away from Healey and decided to try their luck on their own. Work came quickly, but their early experiments were surprisingly tame. They tested names like the Three Lost Souls and the Southern Gentleman, searching for a new identity. None of it quite fit. Before they could fully reinvent themselves, Ted Healey reappeared. He had secured a role in a major Broadway revue, and the opportunity was tempting enough to pull the group back in. Against their better judgment, they agreed to reunite. It didn't take long for things to fall apart again. Arguments over contracts became constant, and Healey's heavy drinking only made matters worse. The tension finally exploded when Shemp reached his breaking point. In a fit of rage, he quit the show and walked away for good. Suddenly, the act was in crisis. There was a gaping hole where the third stooge should be, and the show needed an immediate solution. The very next day, Moe had an idea. He thought of his younger brother, Jerome. Curly had always idolized them, always hovering nearby, always watching and learning. Moe wondered if Babe might finally be ready. Joe Besser, who worked with the group in the passing show of 1932, later recalled that Jerome was constantly backstage in those early years. He wasn't a performer yet. He ran errands, fetched sandwiches, and helped wherever he could. He was part of the world, even if he wasn't part of the act. For years, Jerome had stood in the wings, quietly observing as Moe and Shemp rose under Healey's spotlight. But when his moment finally arrived, he didn't hesitate. To prove his commitment, he shaved off his hair and mustache without being asked. The transformation was immediate. Curly was ready. And here's the twist most people never realize. Shemp, not Curly, was the original third stooge. Generations grew up with Moe, Larry, and Curly, so it's easy to assume Shemp came later. In reality, history just unfolded in a much messier way. That misunderstanding isn't just a fun bit of trivia. It's tied directly to one of the darkest chapters in the group's story. But before getting there, it's important to understand one thing. When Moe suggested Jerome as Shemp's replacement, Ted Healey was furious. He hated the idea, and made that very clear. When Ted Healey first laid eyes on Jerome Horwitz, the man the world would soon know as Curly, he was completely unimpressed. Jerome looked nothing like a future comedy legend. He had a full head of thick, wavy red hair and a carefully groomed handlebar mustache. Healey took one glance at him and bluntly told Moe that the kid didn't look funny at all. What happened next would become the stuff of comedy folklore. Jerome quietly stepped out of the room. A few moments later, he marched back in with his head completely shaved, every strand of hair gone. The transformation was so sudden and so extreme that it caught Healey off guard. That single, fearless move changed everything. In that instant, Jerome stopped looking ordinary and started looking unforgettable. That bold audition was the moment Curly was born. Not long after, the mustache followed the hair, shaved clean down to the skin. It was a total reinvention, and it worked. Healey was convinced, and Jerome officially stepped into the role that would define his life. When fame became a trap. The 1930s and 40s were the years when the Three Stooges truly found their rhythm and became a cultural force. They had appeared in films before, but once they teamed up with Columbia Pictures, everything changed. That partnership became the era most people think of when they picture the Stooges at their peak. Their first short for Columbia arrived in 1934 and was called Woman Haters. It stood out from the rest because it was part of a musical novelty series, meaning the dialogue was delivered in rhyme with a jazzy, almost sing-song flow. Even Curly's name looked different back then. He was still being credited as Jerry Howard. But the studio clearly saw something special. Columbia signed the trio to a 7-year contract worth $60,000 a year, an enormous sum at the time and the kind of money that instantly turned them into top-tier stars. From 1934 to 1946, they produced 97 shorts for the studio, working at a relentless pace. And they didn't stop there. They kept touring, performing live between filming schedules, sometimes spending nearly half the year on the road. The movies made them famous, but the stage kept them connected to the audience and kept the money flowing. Out of the three, Curly quickly became the breakout star. His wild expressions, physical comedy, and high-energy presence made him an overnight sensation. On screen, he felt unstoppable. Off-screen, though, he was almost the opposite. In real life, Curly was deeply shy. So shy that some co-stars said he barely spoke unless the cameras were rolling. The bald head that made him instantly recognizable was also a source of insecurity for him. He hated it, worried it made him look childish and unattractive, and often covered it with a hat whenever he was in public. The very thing that made him famous was also something he struggled to accept about himself. That inner conflict slowly started to wear him down. As his fame grew, so did his drinking. Alcohol became a way to quiet the anxiety, the self-consciousness, and the pressure of always being expected to perform. Fame, in many ways, didn't save him. It pushed him toward habits that made his life harder. Money didn't help either. Curly had no sense of saving or planning. Whatever he earned, he spent almost immediately on cars, houses, dogs, parties, and especially women. He loved dogs so much that he collected them almost as impulsively as he collected new homes. His brother Moe had to step in and manage his finances, handle his paperwork, and even help him file his taxes, because Curly simply couldn't do it himself. His homes were glamorous, scattered around the San Fernando Valley, and often passed between famous hands. He bought a house in North Hollywood from the child star Sabu, then sold it to actress Joan Leslie. He bought land next to Moe's estate in Toluca Lake, with plans to build a dream home, but never followed through and eventually sold it to director Raoul Walsh. His life had a constant feeling of motion, but very little stability. People who worked with him professionally often saw him as quiet, distracted, and hard to connect with. Some even described him as living in his own world. But family and close friends saw something different. Around people he trusted, especially Moe, Shemp, and Larry, Curly came alive. He joked, laughed, and played the clown, just not for strangers. The moment someone unfamiliar walked into the room, he would pull back into himself again. He wasn't antisocial. He needed people. He just didn't know how to reach them. That need showed up most clearly in his relationships with women. He was drawn to them constantly, not just out of desire, but out of a need for connection. He struggled to approach anyone himself, so he usually ended up with whoever approached him first. Whether they were good for him or not didn't seem to matter. If a woman held his attention, he would attach himself completely. Those close to him noticed a pattern. A new woman would appear, followed by a new house, a new car, and sometimes even a new dog. Then the woman would leave, often taking his money with her, and the cycle would start all over again. It was restless, repetitive, and quietly destructive. The marriages that almost destroyed Curly. As much as Curly was drawn to women, his love life ended up being one of the most damaging parts of his story. After his first marriage was quietly annulled, he went on to marry 3 more times. The first of those was to Elaine Ackerman on June 7, 1937. Curly was 32 at the time. Elaine was 10 years younger, college-educated, and completely outside the Hollywood bubble. She hadn't even heard of the Three Stooges when they met. Their first encounter was awkward and quiet, mostly because Curly was so nervous he could barely speak. Still, the connection felt intense and fast. Within a year, they were married in a small, low-key ceremony at Elaine's home. The romance, however, unraveled almost immediately. Their honeymoon at a dude ranch in Nevada was a bad fit from the start, since neither of them even liked horses. After that, Elaine joined Curly, Moe, and Larry on a publicity tour. But once the tour ended, reality set in. Curly went back to his non-stop work schedule, and Elaine was left alone most of the time. That pattern never really changed, and it slowly hollowed out the marriage. A year later, their daughter Marilyn was born, but even that didn't slow Curly down. His career always came first. When he wasn't filming or touring, he still didn't settle into family life. He preferred to go out on his own, and over time Elaine realized she barely knew the man she had married. On top of the distance, there was tension everywhere. Jealousy crept in. Their families clashed. Elaine's parents never approved of the relationship, partly because the two came from such different worlds. Curly had left school early and lived on instinct and impulse, while Elaine was more structured and educated. Curly's mother was another powerful and difficult presence. She had already ended one of his earlier relationships by refusing to accept the woman, and she was cold and unwelcoming toward Elaine as well. By June of 1940, the marriage collapsed. Elaine filed for divorce, and the legal papers painted a much darker picture than the public had seen, including accusations of physical abuse and infidelity. The truth of what happened behind closed doors remains complicated, but what is clear is that the relationship had become deeply unhealthy for both of them. After the divorce filing, Curly's lifestyle grew even more extreme. He leaned hard into partying, overeating, and heavy drinking. His weight climbed, his blood pressure soared, and his health began to fail. By early 1945, he was hospitalized with severe hypertension, obesity, and a retinal hemorrhage. Doctors kept him under observation for weeks. warning him that his body was under serious strain. Only months later, while making an appearance in New York, Curly met Marion Buxbaum. She was younger, glamorous, and came with a young son. Curly fell fast and hard. Within weeks, he was showering her with expensive gifts, jewelry, furs, and even a brand new house. By October 1945, they were married. People close to Curly quickly sensed something was wrong. They felt Marion was more interested in his money and status than in him. The marriage turned sour almost immediately. Arguments were constant, and accusations flew in both directions. After just 3 months, they separated. The divorce that followed was public, bitter, and humiliating. Newspapers covered every detail, and Marion attempted to take as much of Curly's money as she could. The emotional and financial damage was severe. That third marriage didn't just fail. It nearly broke him. Some believed the marriage had never been his idea in the first place. Those close to the family later said Moe had pushed Curly toward it, hoping that settling down would calm him and improve his health. Moe was genuinely afraid Curly was killing himself with his lifestyle and thought marriage might save him. Instead, it only added more stress to an already fragile situation. After 3 failed marriages, the question became unavoidable. Why could Curly never make it work? Some felt he simply wasn't equipped for adult partnership. He was emotionally immature, easily distracted, and lived in the moment. Fame attracted women to him, but once the novelty faded, there wasn't much stability underneath. Others described him as sweet, but scattered, loving, but unable to give steady emotional support. Another view was more compassionate. Curly wasn't chasing women just for pleasure. He was chasing comfort. He was restless, anxious, and deeply uneasy when alone. Women, relationships, and the idea of love became a way for him to quiet that inner noise. But no matter how many times he tried, no relationship ever fixed what he was struggling with inside. Curly's secret struggle. Nobody witnessed. After Curly's marriage to Marion collapsed, his health didn't just decline, it unraveled. It began quietly with small mistakes on set. He forgot lines he had known for years. He missed cues. He moved slower. And no matter how much he slept, he was always exhausted. When doctors finally examined him in 1945, the news was alarming. He had dangerously high blood pressure, bleeding in his eyes, and signs of serious neurological damage. Years of hard living had taken their toll, but so had years of punishment on set. The Stooges' comedy was physical, violent by design, and those repeated blows to the head were very real. By this point, Curly had already suffered internal brain injuries that no one had properly treated. Part of the problem was that Curly simply didn't take care of himself. He didn't go to doctors. He didn't rest unless someone forced him to. He lived like a child in that sense, relying on Moe to tell him what to do and when to do it. Moe loved him deeply and protected him fiercely, but that same protection also made Curly dependent. Without Moe pushing him, Curly wouldn't slow down, even when his body was clearly failing. That became especially dangerous under the leadership of Columbia Pictures producer Harry Cohn. Cohn was infamous for caring about output, not people. When Curly suffered his first major stroke in 1946, Moe begged Cohn to let his brother rest. Cohn refused. The contract mattered more than the man. So Curly was pushed back to work just 1 month after a stroke. The rest of the team tried to shield him as much as they could. Moe and Larry took on more dialogue and more physical action. Directors reused old footage whenever possible. They did everything they could to hide how weak Curly had become. But it was impossible to miss. In his final films, The energy is gone. The timing is off. The spark is dim. It is painful to watch once you know what is happening. Then, on May 6, 1946, everything stopped. They were filming Half-Wit's Holiday, a remake of an earlier short. The crew was ready to shoot the final scene of the day when Curly didn't answer his call. Moe went to find him and immediately knew something was wrong. Curly was unable to speak. His face was twisted by paralysis. He was crying. Moe held him, kissed his forehead, and understood that his brother's career was over. Even then, the machine kept moving. After making sure Curly was cared for, Moe returned to the set and finished the scene himself. With Curly gone, Moe turned to his other brother, Shemp. Shemp had left the group years earlier and was doing well on his own, but he understood that without him, Moe and Larry would likely lose their careers. So he came back, not to replace Curly, but to keep the group alive until Curly could recover. For a brief moment, it looked like Curly might improve. He never fully regained his strength, but he stabilized enough to live outside the hospital. During this time, he met Valerie Newman, a widow who seemed genuinely kind and patient. They married in July of 1947. Valerie became his caregiver as much as his wife, nursing him through his decline and standing by him when few others could. They had a daughter together, and for a short while, Curly had something that looked like peace. But his body continued to betray him. In 1949, Curly suffered another massive stroke. This one left him partially paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. His weight dropped sharply. His strength faded. His mind began to slip. He moved between hospitals and care facilities as doctors tried different treatments, none of which truly helped. By 1950, Valerie could no longer care for him alone. He was placed in a series of hospitals and sanitariums as his condition worsened. He suffered additional strokes. His mental state declined. Some facilities said they could no longer handle him and even suggested institutionalization, which Moe flatly refused. On January 7, 1952, Curly was moved one final time, this time to the Baldy View Sanitarium in San Gabriel. Moe was in the middle of filming when he got the call and immediately left the set to help his brother. 11 days later, Curly was gone. He died on January 18, 1952, at just 48 years old. No one expected to see this guest at Curly Howard's funeral. It was a freezing cold day in January 1952. A quiet cemetery, bare trees, heavy air. A moment that felt like the end of something much bigger than just a life. Moe, Shemp, and Larry stood by the grave, close together, saying goodbye to a brother and a lifelong friend. Around them were family members and a few people who truly knew the man behind the comedy. Not just Curly the character, but the gentle, sensitive, and deeply insecure soul who lived underneath it all. Then, the mood shifted. Because in the crowd, there was one face nobody expected to see. Marion Buxbaum. This was the woman Curly married after knowing her for just 2 weeks. The same woman who later tore him apart in a bitter public divorce. The same divorce where a judge openly labeled her a gold digger, right before she walked away with half of Curly's fortune. And more than that, she was the woman whose behavior pushed Curly over the edge. Her presence in his life had triggered a devastating decline in his health, a spiral that led to the stroke that ended his career and, eventually, his life. After the divorce, she disappeared. No interviews, no public statements, no sign of her anywhere. Until now. Out of nowhere, she appeared at the funeral of the man whose life she had helped unravel. It's hard not to imagine what was going through Moe's mind when he saw her standing there. He was the one who had introduced them in the first place, hoping he was helping his brother find happiness. Seeing her face at Curly's grave must have felt like a brutal reminder of that decision. A mistake he could never take back. To the people who knew the full story, her presence felt wrong, almost offensive, like a wound being reopened at the very moment everyone was trying to let go. So why did she come? There's no clear answer in the historical record. Maybe she wanted to prove she still had a place there. Maybe she felt a late wave of guilt. Or maybe it was something colder. A final way to insert herself into Curly's story, even at its very end. No one can say for sure. What remains is the image of her standing there that day. A ghost from the most painful chapter of Curly Howard's life, appearing one last time at his grave. A chilling final presence in the story of his final years.